There's a whole bunch of information out there that's designed to help you farm better, but sometimes it becomes an absolute clutter mess. What are you doing? What information are you applying? And what practices are you changing? What products are you using in next season to help you farm better amid all this sea of information? That's what we're talking about in this episode of The Granary. You ready for a conversation with some real farmers about real issues? And the best part, you're invited. So pour yourself a drink, grab a snack, most importantly, pull up a chair. Welcome to The Granary. Hey guys. All right, guys, I'm sitting here with my friend Kelly Garrett with XtremeAg, area and Iowa farmer. He's been here a number of times. He's joined by Clint Frese from Augusta, Illinois, a farmer and also has a business over there. You came to The Granary. We appreciate that very much. Okay, I go to these trade shows. I go to field days, all these trials. These companies are putting out information. Social media is a constant feed of use this, buy that next year. Go to these trade shows. They've always got a new product. There's a lot of stuff out there. During the whole run-up in ag the last few years, we saw a bunch of new companies enter this space. Some of their stuff may or may not work. I'm dealing with tight farm margins, maybe even below break even. What do you do and how do you cut through the clutter?
We run our own on-farm research, of course, with XtremeAg, besides some others. And it's one of the values of XtremeAg to me. If I can give a shameless plug, you know, some of the stuff I'm really excited about this year going into 26 for soybeans is things I've conferred with on Temple. He's seen a lot of the same stuff we have. Gives me more confidence because now it's kind of like you've amplified that trial, expanded that trial.
Yeah, well, you get information from 2 sources, 3 sources, whatever. And it's also very trustworthy sources because we've been there and we've seen what his stuff looks like. Are you cutting back? You're going to spend, you're going to cut 3 products out? You're going to cut 3 categories out on the spend in the next season because of any of this?
Yes, I believe so. This year, you know, with things growing and things like that, Mike Evans is going to start taking a lesser role in planning the farm fertility. My oldest son, Connor, Vern, as we know it, is going to start taking on a bigger role. And I have challenged him that we need to cut some fat out. We need to get leaner and try to cut some dollars out of that budget to see what we can accomplish.
Clint, there's a lot of information out there. I'm overwhelmed and I'm not actually out there planting the crops. I would like to simplify. What do you tell me?
Yeah, I think as farmers, agronomists, researchers, we should be asking the question, so what? You know, to companies that are pitching to us that we're getting the information from, you know, so what? How does it make me better? How does it make me more money? And, you know, everybody shows data to support where they work, but I really think we're entering into a time where there's a lot of benefits with biology, biostimulants, nutritionals, foliars, but without being dialed in or knowing the science in the background, it gets pretty muddy. And I'll give you an example. We pushed hard with sap the last 3 years. We've been sap sampling corn, soybeans, and we've learned a tremendous amount, but we're not always driving yield, driving ROI to the farmer with some of the recommendations. And so it really comes down by crop type. So looking at corn and soybeans, what are the drivers in our yield environment that actually drive that corn, you know, to get a higher yield with less inputs with an in-season tweak. And so that's what we're doing in the background at Calibrated. We are taking all these sites where we've sapped and we're looking at the yield, comparing it to the sap and finding which nutrients are the primary drivers. And it's to give you an example, as we've rolled out programs, you know, we've been focusing on micronutrients. Well, I think there's a certain level where micronutrients are critical for the crop. But what we found, it isn't in a 250 or 300 bushel environment. I think it's got to go higher. Whatever little we're getting out of the soil from micros is plenty. So that's what we're doing, is figuring out what's actually driving yield.
I think the easy one, and we've covered it, is first off, you probably can cut back on macros. We've discussed this in your field. We discussed this at our field days. We've discussed it on the Cutting the Curve podcast. And right now there's going to be somebody watching this that will not like to hear that because it's not what they've ever done. I think if I'm cutting through the clutter, the first clutter I'm going to cut through is what I've historically been told from the conventional wisdom, whether it's university or the retailers. You got to put on this many pounds of stuff. I wouldn't.
I would agree that we don't put on much dry, if any, anymore, and we continue to turn down the nitrogen. But like what Clint's talking about, being involved in that research, we're going to turn down the macros, except for we feel like we need more K. But not in a dry perspective, from a foliar perspective, to make sure it gets in the crop, things like that, especially if you have a base saturation problem. That's one thing that farmers need to look at is what's your base saturation, and that soil needs to be balanced to allow that fertility to get in the crop. And if it's not balanced, you probably need more foliar and less dry. But the macros need to be turned down, but the foliar K for us has been very big this year.
So there's a lot of clutter out there. There's a lot of information. There's also historical knowledge. And then there's also what one author calls vertical knowledge. That which you know so well because it's always been that you don't even question it. The problem is it's wrong. There's that too.
And I think it's within agronomy, it gets complicated. I mean, there's dirt that needs fertility, base fertility on it. It's poor soil. And then there's dirt that's really well. Take Kelly's farm. It's been managed well. A lot of the dirt that we get around Illinois, around my place, high fertility, good soil release. So a few little in-season tweaks with the side dress, foliar spray, we can get really, really efficient. So I'd say, one of the big things, work with a trusted source that's doing fertility studies on poor soil, good soil, and finding out, hey, where can I actually cut? And so that's the $1 million, question is, where can I cut? Where can I cut? And that's what we really feel like we can hang our hat on, is with our research. And in corn and soybeans, we found that's interesting. The higher we increase the K and the sulfur levels in the plant, the better we drive efficiency, the better we bring in other nutrients, the better our plant health gets late season, and they're the two primary yield drivers in corn. So going into next season, I would say I would be looking at sulfur and potassium really hard in corn. And a few tweaks during that rapid growth phase can really produce a great harvest.
All right, so you're helping me out here, but we said in this topic we're going to cut through the clutter because I'm a farmer and I've been to 3 field days and I've been to 6, I've been to Farm Progress Show and I've been to all these things, and my head's swimming right now. To simplify it, you just gave me the simplify. He says he's going to cut back on dry. There, I just saved money. Boom. Okay, by how much?
We don't put on any dry, really.
Okay.
And I don't, but it needs to be soil specific.
Yeah.
What he talks about, if you have well managed your farm and your fertility levels are good in your soil, live off that bank account, that savings account that you've built there. Don't put on any dry going into 26 if it's a lean year financially for you.
Okay, simplify it again. You said...
Well, I think going back to your clutter thing, I mean, there's 2,100 biological and biostimulant companies out there. And so as a farmer, when you look at a label and you see a product that makes really big claims, there's probably some questions you should ask. And, one of the biggest calls we're getting on as a group is some of the biostimulants that are being used out in the marketplace. Yep. Sometimes they're taking yield backwards as much as they're creating stress mitigation. So working with a company that knows the background of their products in depth, but when you look at labels, as farmers look at labels and you see anything that's derived from kelp, plant extract, animal extract, protein hydrolysates, it's all saying the same thing essentially.
Yep.
Those are things that are byproducts of other materials, but they're loaded with amino acids. They got all these beneficial properties and stress reduction, but they're loaded in phytohormones in the background, defensive hormones, growth hormones. And what we're finding is as we deploy them all over the place, depending on if you spray it when it's hot or when it's cloudy, or you spray in the south or the north, they're going to react a little differently. So I would be cautioned to really probe, different ag input suppliers hard on those type of products, because they can go a lot of different ways. And that's one of the clutter things I see that is
so the easy answer is to not even use them, which
I think you're better off to not use them. If somebody can't tell you exactly how to use them and what they're going to do and what they're going to do to the plant physiologically, like, is this going to be a photosynthetic aid, or is this a stress mitigation product? Is it going to aid in nutrient uptake? If they can't dial that in and really hone in on what it's going to do, I think it's a good thing to walk away.
You're better off to not use them than to use them and be uneducated on them. Yeah. As technology improves and things get more and more progressive and more detailed, we're using, this isn't just like putting potassium out, putting phosphorus out. You're putting things out that are going to change your crop and affect your crop in a way that you can't imagine. And you got to make sure you know what you're putting out there. and you are better off to not using than to be uneducated. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do some trials and things.
Yeah, there's some good products. There's obviously
some good products. There's a lot of good products out there, but like sometimes you'll see, stacking two products together, using a product that ramps up the hunger of the plant and then not applying nutrition with it, the plant cannibalizes itself. Things like that. Educate yourself on what the product's going to do.
We talked once at this table about the information and where you get it from. I get bombarded with stuff. I'm not even planting crops, and I see it. Of course, I try to keep up. I want to be one of these guys that knows what's happening all around and have a general idea about agriculture. Where do you turn?
For me, I turn to farmers that are actually doing trials. So I'm following the XtremeAg stuff. I'm really big into following the singular agronomic stuff where they're bringing farmers in, talking about real world experiences. And for me, it's always validation on my own farm. So I'll take bits and pieces of different information, but I have where I think farmers probably can do better is, I see a lot of soil tests get sent to me, and fertility through the roof, manure history, and then they're still calling for massive rates of fertility applied. It's like, man, this thing's through the roof. Are we trying to make a sale, or are we trying to benefit the farmer? So who do you work with? And I think getting people that aren't selling you stuff's opinion is a good position.
Well, there's and we always go to fertility, but there's other stuff too.
Yeah,
because if it's the prescription.
I think everybody should have an agronomist on their farm. The problem is a lot of the agronomists are sales agronomists. Mm-hmm. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You need an agronomist that's looking out for you.
Temple went on a tirade about this in one of our Cutting the Curve podcasts. I encourage the listener to go and check that out. He got somewhat animated about this and said, well, just because the guy started out as the tender truck driver, then became the applicator driver, then he was in charge of one of the facilities, now he's a sales agronomist, why the hell would I entrust this guy with $1 million of input cost when I'm not sure about his expertise? There's something to be said about that.
Temple's one of the people I go to when I have questions.
What are you doing to declutter for your farming operation, or the person that comes to you and says, hey, you're a trusted advisor, I've got to cut through the clutter, I've got too much stuff, help me simplify? You just told me I'm going to cut back on my dry, probably, especially on certain soil specific. What else? You're going to tell me to only use a biological or a biostimulant
if you truly know, if the company you're working with truly knows how it's going to work, where it works, where it doesn't work. If it works everywhere, there's a problem, because within these biostimulants, they do not work everywhere.
Yeah, no.
It reminds you, in my business group, we had someone on from the cannabis business, and it's an agricultural product, but also it's, had so much promise. And the pushers of it were, cannabis, it's like the carpetbagger running around with his magic elixir, in the old days. Oh, got a tobacco stain? Cannabis will fix that. Oh, you got a headache? Cannabis will fix that. Oh, your kid doesn't have an appetite? Cannabis will fix that. That's actually true, by the way. Stoners do get really hungry. But, everything you think about. And so at some point in our business group, I said, you ever think I think too good to be true? If cannabis fixes everything, I'm not sure that I'm buying this, because nothing is the magic elixir for everything. I get that with some of the biologicals.
Yeah.
That it's weird, put this in on your crop and it's going to do, and they give you a list that's this long. I'm like, I don't know how it can do all those things.
And again, with the biological and how fragile it can be, pay attention to the water, pay attention to what else you're providing it with, things like that. I have trouble with a lot of biology, and I think it's because of the organic matter in our soil in Western Iowa. The soil is deep and good, things like that.
So biological doesn't that enhancement?
A biological that is supposed to have offensive tendencies to help me make yield, we don't see a lot of gain with all the time. A biological that's got some defense that helps us with the diseases in our soil.
Some fungicidal tendencies?
Yeah, like fusarium's a problem. If I can find a biological that helps us with that fusarium problem, then I do see a yield gain from it.
What else? Okay, by the way, of those 2,100 companies, and you spoke about that, we predicted that they were going to stay around because things were really, really good. Things are not so good now. What do those 2,100 companies become? Talk about clearing the clutter. Maybe the clutter is going to get cleared just by, you know where I'm going with this, right? The clutter gets cleared by, they just go out of business.
Darwin's theory, the law of economics.
Evolution of the survival of the fittest. What do you think happens?
Yeah, I think it gets decluttered, but I also think without the proper knowledge and education surrounding them, they're going to get a bad rap just as a whole from start to finish, and it'll be something that'll be pushed back from farmers where there is some real validity with them. So, as a company, we're trying to double down on the testing, the behind the scenes, understanding where it works, where it doesn't. And, I remember explaining a product to you once, Damian, and you said, what can it also make your car parallel park better? And, back to your comment about, is it too good to be freaking
outrageous
true?
claims.
Yes.
And sometimes they're not outrageous claims, but they're such copious amount of claims. It's like, there's no way this thing can't do all of that, right? I mean, no, it's like the magic pill that fixes everything. I just can't. All right, clutter. Field days. I've been going to them since I was a kid, right? We were working ag, and it's good. It's neat, and it's fun, it's sometimes social, educational. Seed companies. I've never been to a seed company, and I've spoken at these events. I've never once in my career spoken at a seed event where every little garden patch of seed corn or whatever it was out there that they had didn't ring the bell on yield. Amazingly, it was all 64-pound test weight and 290 bushels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, you guys start putting your antenna up and saying, where's the losers? Well, there are none. If I'm wanting to cut through the clutter, I think I would be very cautious about thinking there's a great deal of difference from one seed to the next. I just said it.
I agree with that. On any given year, there can be a great difference of seed from one to the next because you don't know what diseases are going to happen. You don't know where the weather's going to be. And so for that reason, you should plant as diversified of a portfolio as you can. I've had years before where I thought a hybrid was a real dog. I questioned whether I should plant it next year. Next year, it's the best. That shows you, that's part of the clutter. I don't think you should plant one germplasm. I don't think you should be 100% customer of anybody. We have been in the past, and it's caused a lot of problems when said disease comes in and causes a problem with that germplasm. And
that's brand specific, not just variety.
That's brand specific.
I mean, even if you had one company and 5 other different varieties, you might still have a problem. You think there should be, well, first off, you're going against my grain, Kelly. I think that there's no difference from one seed company to the next in large part, but you think there's...
Well, on an average year, if there is such a thing, I don't know if there is a lot of difference. But the problem is there isn't an average year. What disease, what weather pattern is going to come in? And the variety or the brand that was good in 24 might not be good in 25, and it might be different in 26. And so, to me, if you spread it all out, there isn't a difference in the seed. But if you just take one year in particular, then there is a great difference. This year, it wasn't uncommon for us to see a 30 bushel yield difference in a planter pass because we'll have one variety on one side, one variety on the other side, probably from 2 different brands. And it was not uncommon this year with the rust to see 30 to 40 bushel yield difference. But I'm not going to have a knee-jerk reaction and cut out the brand that was less. Right. I'm still going to plant it next year because next year it very well could be better. Because at the end of the day, if you spread it over 10 years, I don't think there's any difference.
All right, Clint. All seeds the same, right? Different label on the bag?
I think there is a certain cases where that's true, but I would agree with Kelly. I mean, I'm planting Corteva genetics as well as Bayer. I want a diversity because I don't know anybody that can have their winning hybrid in 25 be the same winning hybrid in 26. The likelihood of that is very small. So the diversity, there's power in that. And it is a way of clutter. I think sometimes we do make that knee-jerk reaction to completely pull back, and it's usually wrong.
So when we said in the tease that we're going to talk about the decisions we're making for next year on seed, you're not going to change anything.
No, we're going to plant a diversity of hybrids, different maturities from different brands. And I think the one thing we've kind of learned this year, we're looking a lot more heavily at conventional. I think I used to think there was a yield drag to conventional. I think we've drove a lot of corn borer out. And so we're going to go back conventional.
Pardon me. You, speaking of cutting through all the clutter of information and making decisions for next year, you started saying that about the first year I worked with you, that the bump off of all these expensive traits is no longer there. So you're going to talk about decluttering. You're going backwards, meaning older technology, which means you probably have to do a few different new treatments, but you think that works as well for your economics, certainly, as buying the expensive stuff.
Well, when those traits came out, how many years ago, they were great because it was harder for me to control the environment that time that protected the crop from said disease or said pest. Now, with the technology we have on the planter, the technology we have on the sprayer, and the products we have, it's easier to now protect it. To me, those traits have become less valuable because of the other way that I can accomplish the task, right? And so it's less expensive for me to accomplish the task in my own way. And the yield from the conventional corn, if I can accomplish the task and protect it, the yield's better. I say the corn plays offense instead of defense.
Yeah, got it. All right. What other advice do you have that you're going to do next year and you think other producers should do it to make it so that your life is simpler or your economics are better?
One of the things that I felt for a long time I had to use the top new fungicide that come out, a 3-way mode of action. It's more flashy. It's going to add me more bushels. And I guess over the last 3 years, we've been stacking more generics in our late season passes. So one of the things we've seen, we're not really seeing that much yield difference going back to it. And so we're like, generic now is $8 an acre.
As opposed to 3 times that?
Yeah, 20 to 30. So we're going to do some of those things. And then some of my large operators, the only thing they've noticed is a generic over or maybe a top tier new fungicide. The standability is better under a 3-mode of action product. So if you've got a lot of acres, the stuff that's farthest from home that's going to get picked late October, November, that gets the top tier stuff, the top stuff that's going to get harvested first. We go to generics and we cut some costs there. And so I think it still protects the plant. It's just you give up a little maybe standability issues, but it's a way to, cut costs for sure going into next year.
This year at home in our geography, the corn that got sprayed with fungicide twice showed a big yield difference, but it isn't necessarily because it was a top tier fungicide. It was because of the 2 sprayings, in my opinion. And I almost think one thing that you should look at is spraying the less expensive fungicide, but making 2 applications. And you can probably do that in your budget for the same as what one of the expensive.
Or even less, yeah.
Yes. And that, because you're extending the coverage window versus right there. You're putting all your eggs in one basket in that 3-week time period.
So we just talked about a decision you're making and that you're doing and other people should consider it. And we talked about cutting the clutter. Well, sometimes the clutter is from the manufacturer of the new 3-way of action, a more expensive fungicide. And it's fine because they're in the business of selling that. But you cut through that and realize I spent a lot of money for not that big of a benefit.
Yeah. So for us, we're probably the stuff that's far away from home. We'll spend a little more, but maybe if what we're going to take out first, it's a no-brainer.
The marketing machine that comes at farmers is a pretty amazing machine.
Yeah.
And, the traits on seed corn, for example, I think most farmers feel like those traits make yield because of what the marketers have told them. Those traits don't make yield. They protect it. But you feel like you cannot be successful without those traits. Sort through that clutter. Those traits don't make any yield. They protect it.
Yeah.
So
right.
If you got rootworm problems, a stack probably will help you. If you don't, it's probably not going to put dollars in your pocket.
Yeah. So you spent money on something you don't really need.
Yes.
It's kind of like those extended warranties. You buy those?
I don't
either.
I don't.
I'll bet you Kelly buys it. I'll bet you he's one of those extended warranty buyers.
I typically a pickup won't last me long enough to get into the extended part.
Exactly. All right. So the other part, we got the economics and we got the sorting through all the stuff. You and I both agree there's going to be some of these companies that came on the scene are going to go away from the scene. Some of the stuff, arguably, it shouldn't have been here anyway, right? Not being mean, it's just the way it happens. It's the evolution of it's whatever. It's the wilderness, right? And some of them go away. What about on machinery? Can I simplify that? It's getting more expensive. It's bigger. It's got more gadgets, more bells and more whistles. Can I simplify, make it easier on my brain and also my pocketbook? Or is that tractor left the station, so to speak?
That in a lot of ways in the row crops, I think that's left the station because of the technology and thing that's coming. You need to keep up.
Yeah, so that's the part.
You need to, how about this? The only way to simplify that and declutterize that is you need to keep up and understand how to use the technology to make life simpler. That's the way you do it, because that technology is coming. Use it.
Yeah.
Use it for what it's intended for.
Yeah.
Use it for what it's intended for, and then allow it to simplify your life. But I don't think you're going to simplify your life by avoiding it.
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, we're leaning into all the technology.
Yeah.
We feel like it's making us better, making us.
Well, in lean economic
efficient.
times, obviously these companies are laying off employees because machinery is getting not sold as much. But you're going to maybe keep an older machine, but if you have to update the software, you'll do that.
Yeah, if I'm going to update GPS or if I want to update a planner, I think we're going to continue to do those things. And really, I mean, stuff has come down from the machinery side quite a bit since the COVID high.
Where are farmers spending money unnecessarily, or where are they not keeping their guard up? A lot of times farmers are very frugal, but then there's always this thing like, yeah, but you're dropping money over here. Your easy one obviously is overspend probably on nitrogen, but then where else?
Seed and dry fertility.
Yeah.
Seed, dry fertility, nitrogen.
Yeah.
The other one I'm seeing is we're doing fungicide when a plant doesn't have disease, or we're coming in with a fungicide early and earlier. And one thing that I've seen as we've worked with more crops out west, you can overuse a fungicide to a point where it becomes a Roundup, where it becomes unethical. So I think there's still a thing of scouting, and hey, maybe a fungicide is great in quarter 4 to protect that. But if you don't have disease in quarter 2 or quarter 3, why use it?
Why are we dumping it in the mix?
Why are we dumping it just to jump it? You know?
So there's another $10.
Yeah.
And every $10 matters, right?
Yep.
But on the business side of it, where are farmers spending money or not spending money smartly, or where are they cluttered and misinformed or overinformed and not doing it? I'll go first. I just heard a stat that of all the clutter they should cut through, I know farmers like to produce and they don't like to sit at their desk. Insurance. I heard a stat from Chris Barron that the number's pretty staggering of the underinsured that happens out there. And, you know, of all the stuff you're bombarded with, like you said, the marketing machine to ag, go to all these trade shows, man, they're there, and, you know, Farm Progress Show and handing out styrofoam hats and every other thing. But I think that's one that if I were a farmer, I'd say, yeah, there's a lot of clutter over here, but I really need to be better at handling that one.
Yeah, I would say that too. We had 2 combine fires this fall.
You do an insurance audit after that?
So after the first one caught fire, my brother's like, hey, do we got like a rental lease insurance added to this? And she's like, no. He's like, well, what's that going to cost? She's like, a little over $100. And he's like, add it, you know, and then 10 days later, combine fire.
You think that was an uncomfortable call, the second one?
Right. It was an uncomfortable call.
Speaking of insurance for combine fires, my neighbor farmer a long time ago, we were having a beer and playing cards, and my friend from Chicago said, so when that combine catches on fire, you just run to the barn? He said, if my combine catches on fire, I walk really slowly to the barn. He says, I don't want a half-burn combine.
No. That's what we had. We had two half-burn
combines.
I tell you, when it gets up there very far,
yeah,
it's going to go.
And you had one. All right, last thoughts on decluttering and the information and the decisions you're going to make next year. I think I just heard from you. You got any other things you're going to do next year? Make sure your insurance is in place.
One of the other things we're going to do, so we are starting to run a few older tractors, higher hour combines. And it's like, you can pay $900 to have them come out and do a 10-hour 300-point inspection, and where we're kind of mechanical, I think, that's wasted dollars. But we're going to go ahead and do that because you're going to have somebody that has eyes on it that works on that combine.
Somebody touches combines every day versus you that touch a combine once a year.
As we're trying to make, those combines last a little longer, that's cheap, in the long run of being down for a big chunk of harvest. So that's one thing we're doing.
Yeah.
We call that the free $10,000 inspection. It's a free inspection, but there's always going to come back with $10,000.
The things you got to come up with. Right. Exactly. All right. We're talking about decluttering your mind and making life simple. We're also talking about how you can improve your farm economics next year using the information you gleaned from this year. And you know what? You've not just gleaned from this year. I heard stuff from the last 3 years. I heard about the fungicide, cutting back on the cost of fungicide and using it a little bit more frequently. I heard about updating old equipment. I heard about doing machinery work on that. I heard about the business side of it, seed, diversification. I heard a lot of good stuff here. His name is Kelly Garrett. He's joined by Clint Frese. That's an XtremeAg guy. He's a calibrated agronomy guy. If you want to learn more about this company, Calibrated Agronomy, that Clint works with, that started, how do I find that?
Calibrate Your Agronomy.
Calibrate Your Agronomy. I've produced some webinars for you. All right. Till next time, thanks for joining us here at the Granary. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with somebody that can enjoy it also and learn something from it. That's what we're all about here at XtremeAg. XtremeAg.farm is a website with literally hundreds of videos. The Granary Show, Cutting Curve podcast, videos that guys like Kelly shoot out in the field to help you farm better. Also, go over to our YouTube channel. Just type in XtremeAg on YouTube and hit subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. We thank you for being here. Till next time, if you have an idea you'd like us to cover at the Granary, submit it. And next time, we'll cover it next time. In the meantime, thank you for pulling up a chair and joining us right here at the Granary.